Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the special council meeting of Thursday, April the 5th. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Sauk Nation upon which we are gathered here this evening. So, looking to council, with the approval of the agenda, we also need to add in the addition of supplemental and new information, which is item 5.1. The revised 2018 to 22 5-year financial plan, and 6.1, which is bylaw number 697, the 5-year financial plan bylaw. So if I may have a motion to approve that with the amendment, moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Speaking to it, Councillor Parkinson.
I would like to make an addition that I have a notice of motion to add to it.
Okay, and we will add a notice of motion as well. Okay. Is the mover content with that addition?
Yes.
Okay. So that'll come in after item 6. So I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's motion carried unanimously. Okay, so we have the 5-year financial plan. Any public questions or comments regarding the revised 5-year plan budget? Members of the public. We have 3 this evening, so back down a bit from previous, but anyway, welcome.
Herb Haldane, 3118C Otter Point Road. It's just a short question. I was going through the meeting there last time, kind of in my head, and then I was thinking about it once I got home and stuff, but the extra fireman position that came up late in the evening talked about getting a 9th fireman, or one in the budget, or maybe 7th. Okay, so I don't think that was written down anywhere. I wasn't aware that there was an extra one coming in. So I guess my question would be: is there any other office positions or salary positions or paid positions within the District of Sauk in this budget that I don't see?
Okay, perhaps thank you, Mr. Haldane, for the question. I will pass that to our CAO, Mr. Blackhall, and he can speak a bit about some of the positions that are proposed, or all the proposed. The question. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So to the member of the public's question, start with the Community Safety Department. We have a building official, and that would be a building official 3, and that posting's already out. But that was in the plan already from last year. So we have a bylaw enforcement officer that would be starting sometime later in the year. That one is really so that we can address all the evening and weekend calls that we're getting. So we can't do that with the current position, so it has to be a new position. And so that's that. We have the extra firefighter, and that would be later in the year as well. Let's see here. In the development services area, there would be a manager/director of capital projects. So that would be someone that the parks, wastewater, engineering, capital projects would be managed by. And then that person would, as it stands right now, report to the Director of Development Services. And that would alleviate the workload of the Director of Development Services, who's also the approving officer, because right now he has half the office reporting to him. Originally was hired, of course, as the approving officer. So also then in financial services, we have a Deputy Director of Financial Services. That has been in the budget as well, but that will be, plan is to be ideally hired at some point this year. And a support clerk for financial services. Let's see. And back in development services, we have a building maintenance worker. So we discussed that one as well already. So that again would start. None of these positions are likely to start anytime soon. We do have planners, of course, starting April 16th, but we've already discussed those. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the public with comments or questions?
Cam McIntyre, 2012 Penang. I did ask at an earlier meeting about advertising a position before funding was in place, and then, as we all saw last meeting, another position where funding technically, I guess, is in the budget, but the position is yet to be advertised for. I, as a citizen of the district, I'm trying to grasp what the process is for employment in Souk, because it seems to go both ways. Like, there's no funding, yet we'll advertise for a position. There's funding, but no one knows that that position is going to be advertised for. It's somewhat confusing, and you know, in fairness to other residents, I don't think you'd run your household like that. So I'm just wondering, what is the policy in Souk for employment?
Okay, thank you, Mr. McIntyre. I'll pass that over to Mr. Blackhall as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. We don't hire without it being approved in the budget already, so that's a simple answer.
Is it fair to say that some of the questions or some of the positions had been approved already in the 5-year financial plan, so that's why they're already there? In terms of planning, it's to deal with shortfall, or, well, people have either left or on mat leave or departed the district, and so we've just started hiring them. So those are already funded. We're just replacing people who have moved on, essentially, right?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. The planning positions are essentially vacant positions, so that's what we're doing there.
And then in terms of the other building officer, that is a position that had been identified in the plan, approved plan from last year with a 2018 commencement.
Actually, we were meant to hire it, I believe, last year. But
we were meant to hire
yeah.
that position last year and
That's
didn't.
correct.
So they were already approved positions. So what has been posted are positions that have already been approved last year. They just may not have been posted and filled last year.
That's correct.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Doesn't look like it. Feel free to ask a clarifying question if you like. And the deputy finance position was already, that was approved like 2 years ago, I think, roughly. Because it was replacing a staff, well, it was replacing Mr. Blackhall, who moved up in his positions.
As long as he gets funding. The budget proposal, I think, because of, well, myself, it's somewhat confusing, but I indicated it was somewhat vague the other night. But if it showed that the funds, and I don't know, maybe the document you get shows, okay, we're asking for this much because we're asking for a position, opposed to we just want equipment, or this is just the cost of doing the job. I mean, some of the numbers are quite large, and when you're in the public and you look at it, you go, what's going on here? Why is it such a large figure? And then, you know, just through conversation, it's, oh, well, that's another employee potentially. Thank you.
Okay, follow-up from Mr. Blackhall?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We will add a schedule in the plan then that shows sort of positions by department, so it helps with the change in the salaries numbers. So.
Okay, other questions from members of the public?
Thank you. Evening, Mayor, members of council, staff. I'm going to have to go back over a couple of questions.
Sorry,
Pardon me?
we just formally need your name and address for the record.
Oh, Kenneth Canavan.
Thank you, sir.
6220 Calvert Road. Resident here for 40 years. Retired Assistant Fire Chief. Past President of Local 967, International Association of Firefighters. And I used to be President of soccer, too, and baseball, too, here in Sioux. So, just so, okay?
Is that all?
Yeah. And, anyways, I'm making light of it. Anyways, I'm not making light of the things that I'm going to ask about. I've asked a couple of questions in regards to overtime that have been paid in 2017 that were a considerable amount of money, and how it was funded and where the monies came from. And when we look at that figure, It's a tremendous amount of money. I believe it was about almost 14% over budget to pay for the overtime that year. And so one of the questions that we had in the upcoming year was to Mr. Blackhall, the fire chief, and members of council, was that a new agreement's been signed, and there's a letter of intent that says that they're going to look into the overtime, and the union is going to be more lenient with claiming the overtime. The problem is that there's no line anywhere that says they are going to get overtime, and Mr. Blackhall has said, yes, they are going to get overtime because it's a fact of life in an emergency situation. Overtime is there. You're always going to get it. So we want to know where I'd like to know where that's going to come from, because it doesn't show it anywhere when they do pay it. And what we have is we have the relief shifts that normally work, volunteers work, or the paid guys work. And if the paid officer takes a volunteer shift over and above his regular shift, I believe they have an agreement that says that they won't take it at double time the way they normally would. But straight time at 11 hours pay is over $500 for the night. And the relief shift is $315.81 for the volunteer, if we use the volunteer, which is considerably less. It's about 45% a split. And so we have that shifts, and I just happen to have the shifts that were worked for one of the years. And you see where the volunteers have worked and the amount of money that was paid to them. Then all of a sudden, the paid fellows are working. So the question I'm going to ask through the chair, Madam Mayor, if a paid firefighter works a duty shift over and above his regular shift on an evening, is that money come out of the volunteer allotment in the contract, or is there a special line for it that we can't see in the contract?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ebs-Canavan. Mr. Blackhall, are you able to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. The duty officer costs are in the volunteer fire department section of the fire department. We can certainly move that up into the admin part. It's very difficult to know who's going to be able to take a shift during the year. And we don't have enough volunteers to take all the shifts, or either they're just not wanting to take all the shifts. I'm not sure. The fire chief would be the one who could speak better to this. And as far as the shifts, I think the member of the public is referring to from 2017, there was a budget of $80,000. Those were the shifts that have been removed with the new agreement. The actual cost of that for the year was $69,000 on a budget of 80, so it was a little less than what we had budgeted. However, the salaries themselves were over budget, and that's where the overtime would be for the department. When they incur overtime, it just goes into the straight salaries line. There's no separate budget line for overtime. It would be a total guess as to how much is going to be incurred during the year. That's why we include contingency amount in the budget, is to cover for things like that. So because we'd just be guessing, do you put in 10 grand, 20 grand, who knows?
Okay, does that help?
Thank you. And the reason I asked that question is because the paid firefighter would make over $500 for the shift, whereas the district would be paying approximately $315 for the other shift with the volunteers that's already in place. So it's a considerable difference in monies. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. And the other thing that I would like to bring up, I think it's absolutely imperative that someone on council be nominated as head of the Fire and Water Committee, and that that would be part of their duties throughout the year, and that would be something that you would look at in council and pick a member that you felt would represent the district the best. And the reason is that a fire department contract and the police contract are totally different than any other contract you'll ever deal with. You're dealing with shift work. You're dealing with a totally different contract, how they work. And a good knowledge of that is easy to come by setting up, attending their meetings and reporting back to council what they're doing and the reasons that they're doing it, to understand what the contract says and what it means. Because the fire department contract, if I was to give one out and start asking questions, everybody would fail it, because most of the time it's goofy, you don't understand it. And this is what we did in Saanich. And I'm not saying we had all the right things, but it worked very, very well. We brought somebody in. They came on the trucks with them, went to calls, on serious calls, as to what the firefighter does. They stayed in the hall with the firefighters at night, got up at night, went with them, so that there was a full understanding between council and the fire department union, and with the chief of the department and the senior officers, as to what took place, so that they could explain it to public in a way that they would understand. And it's, I think, a very good point. If you feel that way, it would definitely help this council. Okay? Thank you very much.
Well, it's certainly something to think about. Did you say, thought I heard you say fire and water. Did you?
Fire and Water Committee, yes. That's what we used to have. You name it anything you want.
Okay, no, I just didn't get the water part of that. Like,
Well, because fire and water, it just, because of the hydrants and everything like that.
Okay,
It's
no,
all
I was
part of
thinking
the
more
whole thing.
like CRD water, of which 2 are already sitting on, so that's sort of where my
It could just be Fire Committee.
fire committee, yeah.
And what we did too there, and there, I know I'm off the point a little bit, but what we did is we met with the police officers, and because they work the shift the same as the firefighters, they're on the different things, at calls and everything like that, and they get to know each other really well. And so what we did, back in the day, I negotiated for all the Greater Victoria firefighters the 2-platoon system that they're working right now, that they're working on. And we felt that it brought them in line with the firefighters and made the job much easier for firefighters and police officers to work together and understand each other and understand the problems that go with it, all the inherent problems. And believe me, there's a lot of them. So thank you very much. That's all I have tonight.
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
certainly it's something that members of council can think about, and think about your availability and such, and we can discuss it further should there be interest and availability for it. Welcome back, Mr. Haldane.
Just one more question. Looking through the SOFI report, we talk about exempt positions and what types of money they make. Are we following the org chart that was put into place some years ago, and then, of course, it goes up every year or every 5 years and so on? So it's sort of a ladder climbing chart. And the reason I ask that is because if you look at the SOFI report, some of the salaries for exempt staff don't match up to what our org chart had talked about. And when I was on council over the years, we tried to follow along and pay accordingly to that chart. So
That has always been council's will. If we are to go outside of that, then the exempt employee handbook that outlines the various positions and the like would need to be amended. I think there's been some changes, minor changes made in terms of who acting CAOs and the like are. We've dealt with that. And then the org chart has changed dramatically even over this term, and Mr. Blackhall will be providing one as a schedule to the budget.
So if the exempt staff salaries do not match the org chart, should that not be brought back to council so that you can put those numbers up to wherever they're sitting now?
Mr. Blackhall?
Through your worship. Yes, we brought that back last year to get it updated, and then it opened up a bigger process that we never ended up finishing. So we do need to bring back at least the schedule to the exempt handbook so it reflects current day instead of 2012, I think, when it was created. So we can definitely do that. The SOFI numbers, one thing to bear in mind with the SOFI numbers is that they include, like if someone doesn't take their vacation, for example, because it gets paid out, that's in there. So it's more of a cash-based thing than the expense that we say would budget for a straight salary number, right? So if someone works and then we have to take the vacation balance down because we have policy on that, then that would go in and it would make it look like that's getting paid higher than their actual salary number, right? So.
Well, and I'd like to think the org chart isn't retroactive. I mean, if senior staff are being hired and they're being paid more than what the org chart talks about, we shouldn't have to come back to council to retroactively increase those numbers so that they match up. It should be done ahead of time. Somebody should be coming to council and asking for these increases. And the other thing is that it also talks about somebody's education and standards and accreditation, and that plays out in the org chart as well. So we have to be following along that. And from what I've heard about through the fire department and so on, that should all be reflective of somebody's position and somebody's status as a level 1, level 2, level 3, and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
we would agree with you on that. Welcome back, Mr. McIntyre.
Good to be back. Just to make a point on the overtime for the fire department being bunched in with the salaries, I don't think that's a valuable way to do it for yourselves as councillor to make an informed decision. If, for example, more staffing is asked for, and you say, well, look, you know, they've worked enough overtime to pay for 5 men. Clearly, we need another staff member. Well, if it's lost in your salaries, and the self report, as Mr. Blackhall has stated, includes things like unpaid holidays and things like that, if you have an active line item to indicate how much you're paying, then at a glance you'll know. You know, I think it would eliminate a lot of questions for you. That's all.
No, that's a very good point. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Mr. Blackhall?
I think that's, through your worship, that's a good idea, and I think we'll add a line into the budget to actual reports that you get is basically the exact same layout as the actual budget document attached to the budget bylaw here. So we'll just add a line under the salary so that overtime will be shown in that as well.
Okay. Mr. Blackhall, just in regards to the budget to actuals, for some time council had received them on a quarterly basis, I think, or maybe semi-annually, I'm not sure. Can we reinstate maybe receiving them as quarterly good with members of council, just to receive at a regular meeting? Is that level of frequency? Yes, no, indifferent? Okay, maybe quarterly. So perhaps we can receive one at not Monday's regular, but maybe the last regular meeting in April, and then we can sort of go on a quarterly basis from there, if that's okay?
Yep, through your worship, that's no problem. We run them every week, so for our own purposes to manage the budget. So I can certainly bring them to council every quarter.
Is quarterly okay with everybody? Okay. Councillor Casper, you would like them more often? You seem to be kind of hemming and hawing with that, so I just want to check.
I'm just reflecting because for many, many years in the past, we would always get a quarterly update.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, for some reason has just fallen behind the wayside. So I've always figured that, you know, the more everybody's on top of it, and it's all about communication.
Yep, no, and that's why I want them back, because they've just sort of... Okay.
Yep, your worship, I'd just like to add, like this, the actual report, the budget to actual report is the exact same format as the budget. So, and it literally, I run it every week after we do a payables batch, so that's something that can be provided anytime. It just doesn't have, if you want something with a bunch of variance explanations and everything, that takes a lot of time. And that is something, once we get a deputy hired, that we'll be able to do no problem.
Okay, so maybe what we'll do is we'll receive one at the next regular meeting in April, just the one that you've provided, and if council has any questions perhaps of the variance, I think it would be easier than to have you prepare a variance report that we may or may not be that interested in or pay, but I think it's easier if we receive the report, ask questions, and then maybe at April we can then decide, okay, do we want to wait in July or would we like one in June when we get our annual report, and we can just sort of say, okay, or like, you know, every 2 months or something, but let's get it in April and then we can decide on how we go forward from there. Okay. Any other questions or comments from members of the public? Anything? Okay, I think we're good. Okay, so thank you very much, gentlemen. So turning back to council here, does council have questions on the budget? Councillor Casper, or pardon me, Councillor Pearson. Parkinson.
you. Okay, so I think there's been some general questions that were asked tonight from members of the public, but some of them I was saving up for myself through the chair to Mr. Blackhall. I guess I've got concerns when at the last budget meeting I got surprised by a 7th firefighter position being added sometime through the year. So what I would like through the chair is a request is that a breakdown or a little bit more detailed breakdown of where these overtime payments are. And the business case may be fully supported to add a firefighter or maybe 2, as we heard in the last couple of meetings. But I think when somebody looks at it in general, and part of the savings or part of the things that we're going to do is hidden in, and I say hidden, that's not a correct word, is encompassed in a different budget that will be funding a permanent position. I think it's got some risk to it, or it's got some lack of transparency. I guess maybe that's the better way to look at it. So I would prefer that we could break that out and say, okay, if we're going to fund a firefighter position, here's why we're going to fund it, and it will make sense. Not a budget impact because we're already paying those wages in overtime. But then going forward to manage the organization, okay, we said we're hiring a firefighter over here, so our overtime costs should go down here so that it equals out. We're protecting the district at a better position, but it's not costing us any more money. So anyway.
Yep, through your worship, Councillor Pearson. Yes, we'll do that for sure when we, I got your name right. We'll do that. We'll add, we'll come back with a breakdown of business case for the position. I'll need that info from the fire chief to help with it, but it's definitely there's the overtime, and then there's the holiday payout too, because there's just not enough hours to take all the vacation that they're entitled to. So there's a bit of that savings would come from as well. So.
Okay, and just one other follow-up thing that I think from a labor relations point of view is that we know that we just went through a significant bargaining to get our current collective agreement, and one of the demands that came through there was additional positions being put into the department. So that wasn't identified as part of that negotiation, that 7th position. I think we agreed to 2 in the negotiations, if I can remember correctly, through the chair to you. I think we identified 2 as part of that, putting that package together. The 7th and the 8th potential one that we're talking about, I think that's from a bargaining point of view, I think it's also a good chip to have in your back pocket to say, okay, well, we're prepared and we're budgeting this, but making sure that the firefighters negotiating the next collective agreements this is part of that negotiation. So somehow bringing that forward for our next round of negotiations. So anyway, thank you.
Would we receive a report ahead of or like an update in some way ahead of the firefighter or any staff postings actually being posted?
Yes, Your Worship. We'll probably as soon, maybe even Monday's meeting, I can do a quick if you remember when the agreement was negotiated, there was a presentation from the chief that highlighted the agreement. So we'll just bring a summary of that sort of.
Okay, I think it's just that way, council gets questions of many sorts. This way, if we know in advance that a posting has gone out, it just gives us the heads up that there's a posting out, and we're aware that the posting went out, and this is what we understand a start date to be, knowing that it would depend on the successful person and whether or not they're here or whatever, so that would be helpful. Okay, you're good? Okay, Councillor Parkinson, then Berger, then Casper.
Through your worship, in regards to what Councillor Pearson was just saying, when we talk about like bylaw and it has the salaries here, that would include the new position for the bylaw person that we're going to hire? So that if we had the salaries of what is actually being paid and then underneath the new position and what that pay would be. So, and that would also be for the financial for the deputy finance officer, because you have the salaries there for 327. So if you had underneath it the hiring of the new position and what that cost would be, so that it would be deducted from that total amount. It'd be easier to see what positions are going to be coming up, because there's quite a number of positions.
Yep, through your worship. Normally we've done the salary stuff in camera, so
right. Well,
It's not that it should be, I mean, it's public information, so I think I'll try to add a bit of clarity to this so you can see the impact of the changes in those numbers without getting into stuff that is meant for in-camera. But I'll try to add to the transparency of it.
Right. I only say that because the public's asking why the costs are so high, and there is an explanation, but it's not apparent. The other thing I would like to say, through your worship, I would like to make a motion. Okay. And I would like to make a motion in regards to the CRD Arts. And after having conversations, I would like to move that council write a letter of intent to the CRD Arts Commission to join January of 2019 for a 2-year trial period, and that a letter be written by April 30th so that the CRD bylaw amendment process may begin.
Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, that was seconded by Councillor Casper, I believe, and speaking to it.
The reasoning behind this is that it takes approximately 3+ months for us to be able to join the CRD Arts in the first place. First of all, when we send the letter out, it has to first go to the CRD Arts Commission for approval. From the Arts Commission, it then goes to the CRD Board for permission. And then from there, it has to go to all the municipalities that already belong for permission from all of those municipalities before coming back. So in reality, it wouldn't be until August till we would be able to join. And then councils tend not to meet as frequently during the summer months. And then the new year with all the openings begin on the 1st of January. So that would be my reasonings why for doing this. And I think that it would be a better opportunity for all the arts groups because they'd have 3 opportunities during the year of 2019 to try and receive funding, whereas if we join this year, they'd have maybe 1 opportunity.
Yep. And that is something, just the whole process was not fully explained, I suppose, in January. It seemed that it was something that once we gave the A-OK to do was okay, and I thought I heard that our contribution amount would have been prorated for the year, and that isn't the case. So there is a process. The board doesn't meet in August so it also depends. Usually when things go to municipalities, there is a timeline. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60 days. Like we see, with the regional transportation and all those different things that have come to us, there's a timeline. It may depend on when that council meets as well. So kind of disappointing. I think it's important that this information is new for us since we made that discussion on Tuesday, so that if we do have folks that are looking at applying for May, we can't be eligible. Like the problem is that we're not, even though we agreed to participate, we are not eligible for it in this year. If we did the letter as Councillor Parkinson outlined, it would position everything. The CRD passes its budget in October, November of the year prior. So then it would set everything up for a January intake. So all of our groups would be then eligible to meet that intake. Should the next council decide to not participate in the program, then the CRD would just do a budget amendment, and then that council could explain to the various arts groups as to why then they wouldn't be eligible. So that would all happen anyway. So I think it's something that I didn't quite understand, or I didn't think was the case when we heard it, but now we know. So that's what we'll do anyway, or what we can do depending on council's thoughts. Councillor Pearson and then Councillor Casper.
Well, thank you, Councillor Parkinson, for looking into the process of that. So I have one question, and I'm not sure if the chair knows the answer to this. Is it a unanimous support that's required at the board for Suk to join, or is it a majority?
I think it might be a majority. I think to leave, in some ways, like if we wanted to leave regional, I'm not sure actually. I don't know that actually.
Okay.
Good question. We can find out. Councillor Casper? Just maybe Councillor
Thank you very
Casper
much.
might know that?
I'm sorry I couldn't attend the meeting last night, and I'm glad to see that some council members had read the email I sent out in the afternoon regarding my discussion with the manager of the CRD Arts Program and the sort of mechanics of it, and I appreciate the motion that's being presented. I had a fairly extensive conversation with the individual, and I think that when you look at the technical requirements that grants are approved, that's the kind of information that should go out to all of the members of the Sauk arts community, because quite frankly, I don't think many of them had enough information in their hands, because it's not an easy process to get these grants approved. Sauk's already missed 2 intakes and 2 funding opportunities, and there's 2 others available, but the maximum grant for those 2 categories are $5,000 each. And so people have to understand the sort of economics of the amounts of grant money that goes out and what comes in, and how it's dispersed accordingly throughout the entire capital region. The other thing I was going to say was that I did send an email off to Mr. Blackwell in regard to some of the technical aspects, as far as the fact that the CRD budget final adoption occurs in March, and the bylaw would have to be amended in order to allow Sauk to join also. And so that would be a little too time-consuming. And I'd invite any members of the public to contact Mr. Lamb at the CRD Arts and any member of council. This gentleman's a wealth of information on the process. So anyway, that's why I support the motion.
Yeah, I believe he was here at the January meeting as well. Yeah, with...
He presented to us.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions on the motion or comments on the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously then. Other comments? That was it for Councillor Parkinson. Okay, Councillor Berger then. Then Casper.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got paper everywhere, so I'm going to ramble a tiny bit, but I'm going to try and be concise. So on the budget overall, I agree with the last conversation we just had. So through you to Mr. Blackhall, I think it'd be a great idea if we can show a new line with overtime per department, and then maybe a cleaner way to have sort of positions in there. Could we have a line that just said FTEs, like a number of full-time employees per department? Then that would help, rather than sort of listing people's, because some people's salaries, I don't know if it's all public, but even if we had an idea of how many FTEs were per department. For the firefighting, or sorry, the fire department, for the duty officers, I asked the chief, and I believe I wrote down, so correct if I'm wrong, I believe he said duty officer remuneration was a standard pay for both paid and volunteers, so there wasn't a difference. So maybe that's something that we can track too. Maybe can that be separated out as well? So if someone does a duty officer shift, we can have that, the duty officer remuneration in 2 different locations, so we can see how much the career staff are making in duty officer and then how much the volunteers are making in duty officer remuneration. Just an idea. Okay, now I'm going to jump into my capital spiel that you've all heard again, but I'm going to say it one more time. I have a really hard time supporting the budget as it is with the capital with the fire department in particularly. I mean, I still have an issue with purchasing the speed watch trailer for $15,000. I think that's a job that belongs to the police. I would love us to give our speed reader to the police, and then they can go off with ICBC, and our CMP can do their speed watch program and move it wherever they like. I also still have an issue with the $70,000 allocated in the Parks Department for a new truck. Since we made that motion and it was defeated, I actually talked to a few people around town, and actually another councillor that told me that the truck that was purchased last year apparently doesn't work for them, or it's not the right truck. So I guess I'm disappointed that we don't see last year's truck for sale and then purchase another truck. So that one I still wrestle with. And then I'm going to belabor this refurbishment and reclassification of our fire trucks. I'm really disappointed that we don't have the costing in front of us when we look at this 5-year financial plan. And I hate using the term, there's an election year, and who knows who's going to be here next time around, but we really have to do our due diligence with taxpayers' money, with who's going to be here next time around. In this 5-year financial plan, there's $1.9 million allocated in just vehicle expenses. So we have 6 new vehicles. Excuse me, I'm trying not to cough. We have 6 new vehicles being proposed in the capital plan. $201,000 2018, $775,000 2019, $110,000 in 2020, 55 of that coming from taxes, $775,000 in 2021, with $550,000 of that coming from taxes, and then another $50,000 in 2022. 4 out of the 5 years, we're bringing the Fire Protection Reserve Fund down to $9,000. So I have a really hard time with that, because if something were to come up that we needed funds in that Fire Reserve Fund, we just don't have it because we're spending on all these new vehicles. Summerland in 2016, Summerland did a bid in an RFP. They spent $171,000 on refurbishing and reclassifying. Sorry, I'm just going to cough. Excuse me. Reclassifying one of their engines, and it was recertified for another 10 years. Maple Ridge in 2017 put out to tender 2 engines to be completely refurbished. I can't support a budget with this huge amount of money without looking at the cost of refurbishing our current engines. I know a member of public spoke the other day about however many miles are on a truck and why can't we fix it. That's just a regular Chevy. And when I looked in which we did have, Mr. Blackwell did give us budget actuals for the ending of last year and for the ending of April. The end of last year, emergency program vehicle maintenance was only $358. So if our trucks are needing repair, let's repair them. Let's boost that budget up. Let's repair our trucks if they need them. There was talks about safety equipment and inadequate safety equipment because it changes. I've read so many pages on firefighter refurbishment and technology and safety equipment on trucks. It's always changing. So to me, that budget needs to be boosted up, and we need to be updating the trucks that we do have and recertifying and reclassifying them. So doing due diligence going forward, I'd like to make a motion that we don't approve, or we put a freeze, or we remove whatever people want to do. I can't, knowing going forward that there's $1.9 million, which is going to equal a 9.37 tax increase over a 5-year budget. 7.8 of it is just in 2021. And we haven't even looked at the cost of refurbishment, and other municipalities are doing it now. So I have a serious problem.
I'll second that.
Sorry, okay, so my motion.
I don't know what the motion is.
Yeah, sorry, I need to be clear. I just don't. Part of me wants to just remove all the new vehicle expenditures. That's going to be my motion. My motion is to remove all new vehicle expenditures outside of the tender that we already approved until we get some costing done on what it would be to refurbish.
Or just the fire department?
Just the fire department.
Okay. So the motion is to remove all new vehicle purchases for the fire department
From the capital budget.
From the capital budget, just except for
the tender truck that's already been approved.
The tendered truck, the approved tendered
Yeah,
truck.
it's called the tender truck replacement 202.
The approved tendered truck. So that's been moved by Councillor Berger and seconded by Councillor Casper. So would you like to add more to the motion, Councillor Berger?
No, just that I think that, and the fire chief can prove me wrong. Anybody's welcome to prove me wrong. I'm only reading and doing my own research. But if other municipalities and all the fire, I read a great article, which I'll send you guys the link. It's through firefightermagazine.com. And it basically said that engines are your number one driver in cost. That when you buy them, they're there for 20 years. Then they have to be reclassified. Many municipalities now are looking at refurbishment. And when I talked to the chief, there's a place up in Nanaimo that's actually skilled enough to break them right down to the chassis, sandblast all the parts, rebuild, get what they need, and put them back together. When we do that, it gives us another 10 years. So knowing that Summerland just did it, they spent $171,000 rather than $700,000, and they got 10 years.
Okay.
I just think we need to know.
Councillor Casper?
I'm supporting the motion because there's a couple of outstanding reports that are going to be completed or done in 2019, and that's the Fire Underwriters Survey, which is going to look at a wide range of issues for the district, namely capital expenditure, and I'm assuming person power within the fire department. And that's an extensive report that will cover all facets of this. And I think that in order to make that report a little more valid to the underwriters, this is based on written correspondence from the underwriters to the District of Sauk in 2013, that if there is a plan to purchase vehicles or upgrade vehicles in the future, existing vehicles can be granted a 5-year extension. So they can get extensions on existing vehicles as long as there is a commitment to a capital plan to either refurbish existing vehicles or purchase new. And the way this is coming across right now is that I'm not against purchasing vehicles, but all too often it comes across as a wish list, and it's not based on a needs list, because buying brand new isn't necessarily the name of the game anymore. And as what was commented on from a member of the public who did his research, an individual who's had 30 years experience in fire operations from a municipality that did refurbishments on vehicles, said that it's a cost-effective way of doing business. And the other thing is that it's my understanding that BC Hydro at some point they refurbish their own vehicles, whether they're Freightliners or not. I just don't know. I don't have all that information, but they do apparently do contract work for organizations. So that's something that should be further investigated. I'm not prepared to approve a budget that's got a blank check, because come October 15th, there may be a brand new set of councillors around this table, many of them novices, okay? Some of them would have zero or no elected experience whatsoever, no local government experience, no knowledge of how local budgets are prepared and done. And they could be blindsided by one single comment from our staff. Oh, this was approved in the 5-year financial plan. And blindly, they may assume, oh, okay, well, it was previously approved, so we'll just do it. You know, and so I think that we have to show to the public that we're showing due diligence on how the money is spent, because it's taxpayers' money. It's not your money. It's not the fire department's money. It's the taxpayers' money. And as us as elected officials, we're the eyes, the ears, and the voice of the taxpayers, and no one else. And I think that's a responsibility that all of us should hold true to, because very few people have that opportunity to actually come and ask the questions or make the comments, because they've got busy lives and they're trying to earn a living. So that's why I'm supporting the motion as it stands right now. And it's not to say that at the end of next year that amendments and changes could happen in the budget. But it's better to be armed with facts and make decisions that are going to be based on facts.
We'll go to Councillor Pearson. I'll just say that whether Council sitting now agrees or disagrees with this motion, supports it or doesn't, I think it's fair to say that everybody here is very mindful and working on the best value for the taxpayer. So I just disagree that it almost seemed like if we don't support this motion, those that may not support it are being reckless, and I hardly think that's the case. We've received fact-based information from our staff.
On a point of order, I didn't say reckless, so...
Okay, fair enough.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
So I'd like you to correct that comment. And don't
Okay.
make those assumptions, please.
Okay, very good. Councillor Pearson?
Well, I think that I want to understand the motion is, and I support, and I think I'm just going to ask the mover through the chair. So you're talking about removing the 4 years. The 5-year plan is just removing the 4-year plan. Is that, like, I mean, we've agreed to the purchases for 2018 for the new tanker truck or the new tender truck. And so you're talking about going from 2019 through 2022, 4 years. Is that kind of what I'm to understand?
Is that what you're doing?
Yes,
The
and no.
capital purchases from,
Also, but in this year's budget, sorry if I can just speak to Councillor Casper. I don't, look at what we're doing. I don't know what's happening. Sorry, Councillor Pearson. Because he's always talking. Sorry, Councillor Pearson. Also in this year's budget was the replacement of a heavy-duty pickup truck at 201, and I had all the trucks written down by name.
But if I may, it was fire department trucks
Yes,
only was the
yes.
motion.
But it doesn't. My motion is with the exception of engine 202, the tender truck, which we've already approved. So if you notice in this year's capital plan, there also is 2 other trucks to be replaced.
The replacement squad one, right above that.
Yeah, there's the heavy-duty squad replacement, there's a forestry suppression utility, and then there's also some type of trailer. But we haven't had any costing on refurbishment, so I just want the numbers of refurbishment.
Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
so the only, and I support the intent of where you're going with this mission, or with this motion. But I would ask through the chair to our Director of Finance, if we do that, are we limiting the budget for the potential purchase? I mean, we still have to approve those purchases. I mean, if we have a line item in the budget for the trucks that are identified in the 2018 replacement, are we limiting ourselves that we have no budget in case that we decide that we need to do it? No, we're okay. So we can find the money somewhere else in the budget.
Okay, Mr. Blackhall perhaps can answer that. The question from Councillor, you got it, okay,
Yep.
was that if they're all removed, then in the event it's determined that the vehicle is needed, then what would be done to find those funds after the fact?
Like the short term, I get the 2019-22, I understand.
Microphone.
That in principle. But I want to understand what happens if it's identified that we actually do need a truck now and we have no budget for it.
Through your worship, we'd have to do a budget amendment, a budget bylaw amendment, so 2 readings. It just adds time to the process, that's all. From what I understand, in procuring the larger vehicles, it's quite the lengthy process, and there's a risk, of course, with the dollar. A lot of these are U.S. purchases. They would want to get going for a 2019 major purchase. They probably want to get going on it earlier this year to start the planning so that it's ready to be delivered when they actually need it for in 2019. And I understand, from what I understood from the presentation from the fire department on the apparatus plan was that they were going to have the fire underwriters look at that plan to see if it was sound. So that is being done, and I thought that was being done this year. If not, I guess 2019, but that definitely will be done. One thing also is council has already resolved that any purchases over $25,000 have to come to council for approval. So we're not going to go ahead and buy anything over $25,000 anyway without council approving it, even if it's in the budget. So not only that, any major purchase we can't do it without a council resolution to borrow, or a borrowing bylaw, which is going to need a few meetings as well. So there's already a number of checks in the system that would stop anyone from just going and buying a $75,000 truck. So.
Okay, that's sort of my understanding, was that anything would come to council with a report anyway, and which we've talked about with all the items from washrooms to any sort of equipment in this whole process, that we would receive a staff report with those details and then would then progress. The budget is to give us something to plan towards. Our corporate officer advised me that in the event there's changes, because I'm just going to read what she says. Given the financial plan bylaw for April 9th meeting with public input and third will be circulated in the agenda tomorrow prior to the bylaw receiving first and second, She's recommending that we give first and second reading as circulated, and any changes should be done at third reading on the 9th. We don't have any staff in corporate services tomorrow, which means then that potentially we'd have to have this removed from the budget and schedule another series of another special meeting and then push them all out. But I'll just wait for confirmation on that.
Thank you to our corporate services assistant here. We can give it first and second reading and then do the motions. And then, from what I understand.
And then we can move forward.
And then go forward with the third reading for Monday.
So, but we have a motion on the floor right now.
Yeah, so
Suspend it and go do the bylaw.
we still need to do the first and second readings first.
Before you do this.
Right, before this motion is done,
So
because
you can,
24-hour notice has to be given
Yeah.
for the agenda
that's
that's
right. You
received
can
on
suspend
Monday.
the motion right now and then give it its 2 readings and then come back to it.
Can I ask a point of clarification? We just added $34,000 to the budget. So how is that different?
What do you mean, the 30? We didn't add anything.
Well, we added I guess it came out of 2 different things.
The arts, well, what we found with that is because it's a CRD requisition, it doesn't actually come to our budget. It comes through the CRD. So I think in what is revised here, it's been zeroed out. In this revised one here, it's not there because there's no, we don't pay it. It comes through the CRD. Like, we don't pay C-Park out of our budget.
Right. I'm just trying to gain clarification here. We added $10,000 to line painting. There was a few things that we added.
That's all been done already. So like so all of those changes are in the revised document that we have today. And then this has now been posted to our regular agenda for Monday as this. Okay. So in order to keep that agenda as is, what is proposed by corporate services is that we give first and second reading on this as is, then get public input, and then make amendments and pass third reading as amended on Monday. So because if in the event that we change things tonight, we don't have staff due to scheduled holiday plans, which means they can't change that for Monday. So that's where it's just being advised in order to keep this roll on. However, if council so chooses that no, we don't want to wait till third reading, we want to do it now, then we need to look at scheduling other special meetings in order to make the work. Because once we pass these bylaws, we have to pass the property tax rate bylaws, and we have to have those adopted by a set date, and we're running out of time.
So, Your Worship, I'd just like to add, I personally do not have time with the auditors here. My days are taken right up with the auditors. So staff would really want to stick to the same schedule. Otherwise, we're going to need more special meetings. So.
Okay. Councillor Casper?
Well, quite frankly, if we're being asked later on tonight to give first and second reading, council can make a motion to amend second reading at any time. Why would you have to wait till Monday to do that? There's no need whatsoever. This is a duly constituted council meeting right now. And so we have that right. If we gave this bylaw here, first and second reading, and then there was another motion made to amend second reading and to do it that way. I don't want to, get caught up in a process that, first of all, is cumbersome, confusing, and causes delay. I want to see this motion dealt with. That's why I'm supporting it, because then it gives clear direction. And 24-hour notice, guess what? Tomorrow's Friday. A line item changed, or line items changed in a 5-year capital plan really will have no bearing whatsoever. This is the important year, 2018. That's what we're collecting taxes for, 2018. We're not collecting taxes for 2019, 2020, 2021. All these other years, they're just a statutory requirement for a plan, nothing else. It has nothing to do with your annual operating budget whatsoever. And so if you want to amend from 219 on, it has no impact this year on this budget for this year. It's only the financial plan, the 5-year plan. So I can't see why there's not the will to assist us in making this happen. If this is the wish of council, then it should be encouraged.
Mr. Blackwell?
Through your worship, I believe we said just that we would, if you give it first and second reading, then do the change, then we can come back on Monday with the change.
With it amended if it passes, but my question to corporate staff was that we have a motion that's live right now ahead of first and second reading. So that's why it was mentioned to suspend that motion to tonight till after first and second reading has passed. Then, should that motion pass, it'll come amended on Monday. But by doing the one first, it'll push one first and second reading out, because then this needs to change. And then it'll push it out from Monday because we won't be able to do it and give proper notice in time for Monday. So all I'm saying is the order. I'm trying to help this process.
I agree to suspend. That's the seconder.
So the mover is okay with with it being suspended until after first and second reading is passed. Councillor Casper?
So what about the other proposed amendments, like having on the budget document all of the listed full-time positions that are part of some magical organizational chart with salaries that none of us have ever received?
And that's where our finance director...
This is all I've got, and it's public information, by the way. I got all the salaries, everything of all the unionized positions, and you just got to go to the collective agreement, and you look it up online, and you can tell what everybody's making in this place. It's public, it's not in camera. So this is the last one we all got. And so what I was caught by surprise, watching the tail end of the meeting, because I was sick at home, and you know what?
No, you're actually
listen,
right off the motion.
You know, why do you rule me out of order when I listened last night and there were people talking about all sorts of things and nobody got ruled out of order?
Just continue,
I'm talking
Councillor
about
Casper.
the process of this budget. And what gets me is that the lack of clarity, the lack of transparency, and Councillor Pearson talked about it. You know, like... you have to come to grips with this stuff. You know, I asked 3 meetings ago, could we please have a list of all the full-time employees next to the salary? That's all I asked. I got a new sheet today. Well, there's no numbers there as to how many people those salaries represent.
So that's where Mr. Blackhall said earlier tonight.
Yeah, I know. So is that going to be included in the brand new Monday document? Like, all that stuff should be there. So that's another amendment.
Okay, maybe we'll let him answer.
Through your
Mr.
worship,
Blackwell.
I did offer to go in camera with council on the salaries, and I never did hear back. So, unfortunately, staffing stuff we do usually go in camera to discuss.
Every salary you can look up in the
I'm happy to go in camera with council to discuss the salaries budgets.
But you're also working on a schedule to this budget, was my understanding, that what can be provided openly would be provided openly, and, you know, and that's something. So when would we expect to receive that?
I can meet anytime with council in camera to, needs to be on the agenda first, obviously, but.
Right.
So, anytime. And I can add positions into the next version that you're going to see on Monday.
Okay, so that was the answer I was looking for, was that the position with those details will be on the copy that'll come to us on Monday. So Monday, okay, we'll have that. That answer your question, Councillor Casper? You asked for when you would receive that?
My point that I'm trying to make, and I know it may sound like it's a difficult one to make, is that all of the unionized positions within the district of Sauk, you can go to labor relations, call up the contracts. If you know what the positions are, and you know what the positions are within the organization chart, the district, any person can calculate based on the annual amount of salary and hours they work, do the arithmetic, and that's the publicly posted salaries. It's all public information. There's nothing in camera here. You know, it's delusional to think that, it's in camera and we can't tell the public as to what people are earning in this place? Like, I don't get it.
Okay.
There's something wrong.
Okay, thank you.
And that's never been the practice of the past.
Well, I think it always has, but that's
No,
okay.
it has
Mr.
not.
I'd like Mr. Blackhall to answer. Thank you, Councillor Casper.
The SOFI report discloses all the statutorily required salaries information. We can disclose a lot more than that. The salaries are public information. There's nothing being hidden here. The reason it goes in camera is because names often come up and we start talking about names. That stuff needs to be in camera.
Okay, so we have this motion, so I'm looking for it to be, okay, it's been suspended until after first and second reading of the budget as it's presented. We've given direction to Mr. Blackhall on additional information. It doesn't change the numbers, it's just additional detail in the budget that can be incorporated in. You've worked on this budget with Mr. Blackhall for 4 years, so to hear it all coming now sort of surprises me just a little bit, but that's okay.
Yep. Sorry, Your Worship. Yeah, it just needs to be postponed until after you've given the 2 readings, and then it can be still dealt with tonight, which I think you said.
Yeah, I used the word suspend, but postponed, I think that's okay, Councillor Berger. Okay. So then that puts us to our other recommendations then. For first reading, if I could have that up on the screen, please. And just while that's happening, I did receive an email from the chair of the CRD Arts, and it was to answer the question about requiring a majority of 2/3 to amend the establishment bylaw. Any establishing bylaw amendments require a 2/3 approval. So not unanimous, but 2/3 approval. Okay? Okay, so the motion here then is that Council give first and second reading to the bylaw cited as the 5-year financial plan bylaw 2018. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. So the point that I wanted to make is that this still does require a full public input session, which you'll have on Monday. So there may be other members of the public that may have some concerns on any items. So then at that point, hearing that opportunity, then Council can continue to make other amendments at that time. And that may then require another special meeting, perhaps, depends on the dialogue to deliberate on that. But I just want to cite that that's an option. Discussion on this motion? Good. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Casper and Berger are opposed. Motion carries. Yep, they're always recorded. And motion carries. So now I'd like to go to the motion put forward by Councillor Berger, please. So I will not be supporting this motion. We've heard from our finance director, from our CAO, that any purchases would come to council in a full report. To say that a new council coming in would not receive that information, well, they would receive it in the report. There would be public input available to those, and we have received information from our staff, and I think as we go ahead, if we want to ask for refurbishment and to have that pursued, we can make that motion at that particular time and receive that. I know that councillors have done their research, and I appreciate that. I've not seen any of that information, so I'm going... We've used the word transparency a lot. I think you want to know how decisions are made. I'm making it on information that's been made public as throughout these entire deliberations. I'm not aware of the other materials that have been discussed or received. So I will not support this. Councillor Loggins, then Pearson.
Thank you. I will not support the motion either, and really it's just for the same reason as we have the washrooms, EV chargers, the sewer reports coming out. We have to have the money there so that we have a budget on what we can spend, and when we receive the report, we can decide whether or not that report suits our needs. It's more fiscally sound to have this money approved in advance, as it's better for me to see that than it is to amend the budget going forward, since we will be receiving that report anyhow. But that's pretty much it. It's the same with the washrooms, it's the same with the sewer, it's the same with the EV chargers. We'll receive the report and we get to decide at that point. And we can also ask the chief as well before we receive the report for the additional information that we require.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson.
I'll be supporting this motion because I think that there's a lot of angst around the table around the budget implications long term on this capital project. I think we have a report coming forward from the fire underwriters, and I think that to do due diligence for everybody in the community, I think that it's not a reflection that the plan is bad. It's just that it needs validation. For me personally, I am concerned about the 2018 purchases, but I think I've heard enough from the CAO to know that if there was a purchase that we need to make, we can get that done. So I think that there's huge implications with this budget when you look across that line and see what's coming at us. I think I raised that concern in our original budget deliberations about, when I'm seeing millions of dollars, and I think it was 4.8 million coming across the next 5 years for the fire department. So significant impact to Souk. So I think we've got to do due diligence, and maybe this is just a way to slow that down. So thank you.
Councillor Parkinson.
Through your worship, I do not agree with this motion either. I believe that when we put into our bylaws that staff has to come forward to council for any purchases that they make over $25,000, that there's really nothing in here that they will be going out to buy. So each vehicle will be individually coming forward to us for us to approve or not approve. So it doesn't mean that we have to agree with it or not. So but I do agree with the part that we should be looking at the option of refurbishment. So I personally would like to see the research done on that. And yeah.
Okay, so I think everyone has spoken on this, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Loggins, Councillor Parkinson, myself as mayor are opposed. The motion's defeated.
I'd like to make a motion.
Councillor Casper?
Yes, I'd like to move that the hiring of an additional firefighter be postponed until the completion of the fire writers or the insurance underwriters, firefighters, the insurance underwriters survey report is completed. Okay,
is there a seconder for that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Pearson. Would you like to speak on the motion?
Yeah, just briefly. It's not to say that a position may or may not be needed. I think that what we have to do is go through a process that is independent, that was discussed both by the chief and I think others and members of the public. So when that's completed, then it could be dealt with during that budget year when that report has been completed.
When is the report being done?
Okay, other Councillor Pearson as a seconder. Would you like to speak to this?
No, and
but you're speaking.
No, yeah. I do want to say something. I was thinking about it, the way that was written. The reason that I support this motion is that I think that a business case so that we can clearly identify where the public will have a comfort level of why we're hiring another firefighter. I think that's, and when I say postpone, it's not, postpone is a good word for me. I'd like to see the budget match the hiring of the additional firefighter. I really believe hiring the other firefighters is the right thing to do when I sort of mine into the finances, and I thank our CAO for that. But I think that business case should be up front before we do the hiring. So.
Okay, Councillor Parkinson.
Through your worship, do we know when the fire underwriters report is going to be done?
Through your worship, I believe the fire chief went over that at when they did the presentation of the apparatus plan, but I thought he said it was happening they could arrange for it to happen pretty soon. So I thought 2018.
And my second question to that is, when was the additional firefighter going to be hired?
Through your worship, I think it had it in the budget for like in the fall sometime of this year. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. Just thinking back to our last fire under survey, I think it was 2010. And it was actually a pretty interesting document because it showed us different pockets of the community where needs could be. I struggle with this motion. Part of me thinks that, yes, it's a good idea. We should get the fulsome report and discussing it as a whole. Then the other part of me thinks about this overtime issue that we have and what's the best way to play it out. But listening to the chief I believe he did say he could get that. I thought it was sooner than what Councillor Casper said. I thought he said he was speaking to fire underwriters and was going to get that going right away. So I'm hoping that it's sooner than later.
For myself, I think this is just one report of many that we would need to look at for many different things. In terms of the fire department, we have heard from members of the public that we need to continue working on expanding our department to meet the growing service needs of our community. We knew that with the police. We didn't receive any fulsome report from the RCMP, just some call for service information and words from the staff sergeant on how we can achieve a work towards a 24/7 coverage, and that then we've since put funding for 2 additional over and above our required amount into our budgets over the years that we've sat here together. In terms of the fire department, with the population growth, the number of dwellings that we have, and the extremely hot, dry summers that we can expect that we have had last year and we can look forward to in the years to come, I think it's better that we're prepared for this. And I think that, as noted, we would receive more information ahead of this. So I don't support the motion. Anything further from members of council? I'll call the question then. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillors Loggins, Parkinson, myself are opposed. The motion is defeated. I think for those of you that may be disappointed in the defeat can realize that there are going to be reports coming to council that will allow for more dialogue and information for us all to receive. Mr. Blackwell?
Your worship, I'd just like to add to that. So we'll bring that business case forward before any posting goes forward, just so that we know that council supports us going forward with a posting before there's a posting.
Okay, Councillor Casper.
Yeah, I just want to make a final comment on this whole discussion, and it's the greatest respect to all the hard work that our Director of Finance, acting CEO, does. He's done a great job considering the fact that he's got a lot of work on his table. But I was very disappointed to hear that there was an additional firefighter position included in this budget. That was never talked about. It was never identified or spoken about at the previous meetings until after questions arose from the public and further discussion took place around the council table. And I felt disappointed by that. And more importantly, it just showed to me that the document that we have, and as I said in previous meetings, it would be really nice to know what are the full-time equivalents on each of the salary line items, so that we're not caught broadsided. I'm still not satisfied with the numbers associated with the landscaping and outdoor department where all those workers are, because even though there's been an adjustment in the new document received by about $20,000 lower than what was originally anticipated, I still see a $20,000 discrepancy. So, I'm not going to get hung up on $20,000, but it's not really made abundantly clear how many positions are we actually going to have in that division. Because on our current roster that we've received, late last year only showed 4 workers. And these were all full-time positions. And I supported that. But then I hear stories, well, no, it's going to be 5 people. Then it could possibly be 6 people over and above the manager, and they're going to be auxiliaries or part-time, or they're going to work 8 months. Well, you know, those numbers just don't add up. So all as I'm concerned about is, from my perspective, for other councillors and the public, that we have more clarity and transparency in the process. That's all I've asked for, ever. And I hate to sound miserable, I don't feel good, but I'm not going to blame that on you know, my comments, because I feel passionate about this, and I feel I personally have stake in these budget documents based on the year's work that was done in the past. And I'm proud of the work we did in the past. And I just don't want to see that hard work thrown out the window. And that all boiled down to all those things, those strategies that we talked about. And the top one is a big bag of money there. And that which deals with our budgets and how we go through a proper process to make sure we get good value for the taxpayers' dollars. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much to Brent and the staff for their hard work.
Mr. Blackhall.
Yep, through your worship, and to Councillor Casper, and thank you for the comments. And we are trying to make this document improved as much as we can. I don't have all the time to put to it that I'd love to put to it, and when we get a deputy hired, it'll be a better document. I think we can add, though, still before final adoption, a schedule that will show the positions by department, and they're based on, you know, senior staff meet, and where are the needs, like where are we falling apart, what do we need to address to provide the service that the public's asking for, and that's all that's in there really. And from what we've heard from council as well, like where you guys have said it'd be good to address areas. So that's all that's in this budget. There isn't anything additional in this budget except perhaps the one that we added about the potential building maintenance type person, because we are spending a lot of money on contractors, and it comes to a point, if you look at it being an in-house position, it may make more sense. This building, our parks buildings, our wastewater buildings, we've got a lot of buildings now. And then also to go, the parks department, I mean, we acquire more and more and more land every year. This year it's $2.3 million of land that we've acquired through subdivisions, developments. So, I mean, it's a lot of extra space to maintain. And, you know, you're going to hear from our GIS person on Monday when we present there's going to be a bit of a presentation of the new website, and also at that time we thought the stuff that I didn't get a chance during the finance part that includes the GIS, but all the asset management part. And I think that's the missing, you know, is a disconnect between the positions that have been added in the parks. It's because so much parkland and stuff's been added that it's going to keep growing unless there's no development. It will just continually need more staff, and you can pretty much budget, you know, probably 10% of what we're taking in on donated assets should be going into operations, and that's this year alone well over 3.5 million of donated assets. So, you know, that's a big hit to us, and that you can't just do nothing and the public's going to expect that we're providing some service out there. So that's all we're doing with the staff. The staffing budgets, we're not throwing in all sorts of goodies in there. It's just really just trying to keep up with things. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blackhall. You've had a lot on the go. You've certainly risen to the occasion, and now I know that you've so busy with the auditors and then all these additional meetings and getting us information. I know there's been numerous email queries and the like that have also come your way, so thank you for attending to all of those things. I certainly appreciate the work that you do and all the staff that have presented on all the reports and having the information for us here. So, seeing next will be a notice of motion that came from Councillor Parkinson. Go ahead, Councillor Parkinson.
So I would like to move that council...
Microphone, sorry.
I would like to move that council invite Ken Ebbs-Canavan and Cam McIntyre to a committee of the whole meeting to discuss their fire commission report, their findings.
Okay, so that's a notice of motion that will flow to our next regular, I believe, not Monday, but not the scheduled April 23rd meeting is where then we would receive that, and then should it pass, we'll set a date. So likely a May committee of the whole would be when we would get through that, and that sort of works because we have the 16th set aside to deal with our community grant applications, and just depending on the outcome of Monday, there may be a need for meetings. So we'll just see how that goes. So on that note, a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favor, opposed, motions carried.